Welcome back to Conversation to Close. This is Sean, and today we're going to be going over objections and rebuttals. So here's the thing with objections and rebuttals. When I teach my team how to do these over the phone appointments, I teach them to do them in a way where we're overcoming the objection before we get it. We're addressing it ahead of time. That way, at the time where it would come up for everybody else, it doesn't come up for us because we've already addressed it without the seller bringing it to our attention first. So it's difficult sometimes to come up with rebuttals for objections that I'm not currently hearing. But for new people, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a few of the most common ones and how I overcome them. Now, again, keep in mind, when I do this for real, or when my team does this for real, during the first appointment call, the second appointment follow up, however many, whatever your process is, during the discovery, we're addressing these potential objections right then and there. So that way, when we get to the closing, it doesn't really come up. Like a lot of things that we'll do, you'll hear me say pre close a lot. We'll do a lot of pre closing statements. It's a little bit further than assuming the close. It's more asking a question like, hey, if I do this, this, and this, is there anything stopping you from moving forward? That's a pre close. So you're kind of asking for the business, but not fully. And you just salt and pepper those throughout the entire interaction with the seller. That way, when it does come time, one, it doesn't sound weird for you to say it, and it doesn't sound weird for them to hear it. And if you've done everything that they said that they wanted, then there should be no reason for them not to move forward. That's the idea that you're going for. But I'm going to go a couple through the most common ones, and we'll start there. So, your offer is too low. You guys will get that a lot. Here's something that I heard. This doesn't come from me. This actually comes from someone on my team. I've never done it this way before. But when she did it, it was fantastic, and it's working for her. She points it out. Now, me, I would say something along the lines of, "Hey, I know you're probably getting 101 phone calls a day, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I'll see if we can make this the last one. I'm not here to waste your time or mine. I got a couple of questions. I'm going to send you an offer. If it looks good, we can do something. If not, hey, good luck to you." That's me. What she says is she explains it. She says, "Well, yeah, that makes sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I bet you're getting a lot of lowball offers." And that's because all of our investors, all of these investors that are calling you wanting to buy your property, their formula, their marketing metrics, they're all pretty much the same. But here's what I can do that's different. And then you break it down what you can do that's different. I'm not going to BS you. You could say something like that. I respect you enough to tell you the truth, Mr. Seller. And I don't know who you've been talking to before, but the fact of the matter is, and you can get mad at me if you want, but you can't ever call me a liar, your property isn't worth what you're asking for it. And here's why. Or because. Studies have shown that a lot of times when you use the word because and then follow it up with something that actually makes sense, your conversion rate of people going along with that statement goes up. Your property isn't worth that much because. Now, here's the thing with that. That's a double-edged sword. A lot of people don't have the nerve to say that to a seller. I do. My team does. Because we build enough rapport where we can say that knowing that it's going to make them upset, but they aren't going to blame us for it because we've built that rapport with them. We have established ourselves as a professional that knows what they're talking about. If a doctor tells you you should probably stop smoking and eating fried food, you're going to do it. Why? Because they're a doctor. You don't have to understand why you agree with them, but you agree with them because you respect their professionalism. A mechanic tells you need an oil change, you're probably going to do it. You don't have to understand how oil works in your engine, but if the professional tells you need one, you're going to do it. If you posture yourself as a professional and you build the rapport properly, you can use the rebuttal. Your offer's too low. Well, I bet it sounds like a lot of the offers you've been getting. And the reason for that is because all of the investors, their formulas are the same, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You're not getting a lowball offer. You're getting an offer that makes sense for the buyer or the investor to make some money. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to invest in your property. And then you break down the numbers. Here's where you need to have your due diligence done ahead of time. You need to have your ARV. They need to be solid comps that you can give to the seller and say, look, grab your phone. Let me show you something. Check your phone. I just sent you a text message. And it'll be addresses. Put that into your Google right now. Go to Zillow, go to Redfin, whatever. You see this property, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? This property sold for XYZ. You're asking for what this property sold for a couple of months ago. But here's the thing. Look at the photos of that property. That property is completely renovated. It would take X amount of dollars to make your property look like that in order to be worth that much. And one of the most powerful questions that I use when I'm dealing with a rebuttal, how am I supposed to do that? So I have to ask you, Mr. Seller, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to give you, for example, $300,000, which is what your house would be worth when it's completely rehabbed, then put $40,000 into it to rehab it, pay your closing costs when I buy it, pay the closing costs again when I go to sell it to get my money back, only to be losing about $56,000, $60,000 on the transaction? How am I supposed to do that? And then you be quiet. One of the things I teach my people, use silence as a weapon, because it is. A lot of people don't like silence. It's called uncomfortable silence for a reason. So use it. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you're one of those people that you don't like silence, you get anxiety, you want to, oh, I got to say something, mute your phone and talk. Ask the question, remain silent, and mute your phone. That's what I used to do. Then you could talk until your heart's content. You're not anxious anymore, but the seller's not hearing you. They're just hearing that silence. And they're not doing the same thing you're doing because they're not prepared for it. You are. Do your due diligence on the property and make sure it's solid with the rehab. If you followed one of my other videos breaking down the rehab estimate, you know that on a medium flip, it's going to be about $45 a square foot. Do the math. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your property is 1,000 square feet. Looking at it, it's going to cost me about $45 a square foot to rehab it. That's $45,000 that I'm going to have to spend. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to spend $45,000 and then give you too much money for your property, if I'm being honest? But what I can do, if you're dead set on that amount, here's what I can do. Why don't we do something like a creative deal? I can give you the amount you're asking for. You just have to take it over terms. And there's your rebuttal for your offer is too low. You make them understand where you're coming from, put them in your shoes. That's how people empathize. That's how people see from a different perspective. Put them in your shoes. Paint the picture. Go into detail of what it looks like. Do your numbers. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your property is only worth $300,000. I'm going to spend $45 a square foot to fix your property. Your property is 1,000 square feet. That's going to cost me $45,000. I'm going to pay about $6,000 in closing costs when I buy this from you. Then I'm going to have to pay another $17,000 in closing costs when I go to sell it on market after I've spent 2 to 3 months rehabbing it and $45,000. Then it's going to sit on market for 30 to 90 days before I ever see a dime back. So while you're over here sipping Mai Tais with your money, here we are 6 months down the line and I haven't seen a penny yet. How am I supposed to do that? How could anyone do that? I have to run a business. So what can we do? Because I'm interested in your property. I want to make sure you feel good about what you get, but I can't do it to where it's going to put me in the red. So what can we do? And then be quiet. Let them think. Well, hold on. What can I do? Let the numbers and the scenario that you just painted for them enter their brain, sit there for a while until they come up with an answer. If they say something, well, I don't know. Okay, fair enough. What if we did this? And then you can move into a creative option, a subject to, a seller finance, a wrap, whatever. Maybe an ovation. It all just depends. All right, so that's cash deals. Let's look at a subject to. Subject to, the most common thing people are going to say is, well, what if you don't make my mortgage payment? What if the buyer doesn't make the mortgage payment? I'm really glad you asked that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Guess what? When we do these type of transactions, we set up servicing, and by servicing, I mean we set up our payments. First of all, they're automatic, they're attached to our bank account, and they're through a third party. So we're going to use the escrow company. They do this 100 times a day. This is a very common transaction. So they're going to ask you for the mortgage login information. They're going to ask my buyer for their bank account information. And before the deal is ever closed, before final paperwork, they're going to link the two, and they're going to set up an automatic payment. And every single month, they're going to make sure that automatic payment goes through. It's part of the system. That's why we use them. So it'll literally go from the buyer's bank account to title and escrow. Title and escrow say, check, we got this month's payment, and then automatically send it to the mortgage company. If they go to take the payment from the buyer 1 month, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and it doesn't go through, the protocol is they're going to immediately let you know. Everyone's going to try and reach out to the buyer like, hey, we need that payment. But then that way you guys know. So if you want to make the payment so it doesn't go on your credit, it can. If the buyer still doesn't make that payment, that triggers a deed in lieu. It's in the paperwork. And that basically means that escrow is going to take the property from the buyer and put it right back in your name. You get to keep all the money we've given you. Any rehab we've done on the property is yours to keep. If we have a tenant in that property, that tenant is now yours, including that monthly payment. And when the deed in lieu is done and the property is 100% back in your name, you can literally sell it to somebody else the very next day. So in all honesty, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you probably want me to default on the loan. But here's the thing. Here's why that'll never happen. If I'm ever in a situation where it's like, uh-oh, I may not be able to afford this payment, I would just sell the house. I would sell the house. We would pay off the mortgage. I would pay off whatever I'm owed to you. And if I walk away with nothing or have to come out of my pocket a little bit, then it is what it is. That's why I've never had a situation where a property has ever been taken from me or one of my investors, because they just sell it. They don't want that on their credit. They don't want that on their reputation, whatever word you want to use. And that's it. That's the rebuttal to that one. Truth. If you're using our contract, the deed in lieu is in there. I think it's like number 22. And then this is a great segue. I'll tell you what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, give me your email address. I'm going to send you the actual paperwork. Let's go through it. If you like it, we can move forward. If you don't like it, we'll stop. If you want some of the verbiage changed, I can change something. But let's go through it. Let's have you see it. And I'll go through line by line what each section means and how it's a benefit to you. Done. Because now you've got them on the phone, you've got the contract in front of them, in front of you. And as long as you're explaining it properly, you should be able to get it signed right then and there on the phone. That should be your protocol anyway. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see. We'll go seller finance. And I don't want to use the one that says, because a lot of the people in seller finance will say, well, what if you default on the payment? And that goes right back to the deed in lieu. So I don't want to go through that. Let's do another one. What's another good one? I'm not familiar with seller financing. It sounds risky. That one I get quite a few times. People, it's ignorance. They don't know what it is. And chances are, if you don't know what it is, you're scared of it. So this is, again, where I always tell people, be upfront, be honest, be professional, and be knowledgeable with what you're selling. You have to understand the ins and outs of seller finance. And then you just explain it in a way that they understand. Seller finance, to be perfectly honest with you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's just like buying a car. So what happens when you buy a car? You go to the dealership, you pick a car, you determine what you're going to do as a down payment, you negotiate what's going to be a monthly payment. Once you pay all the payments off, you own the car. This is exactly the same way. Instead of me going to a bank and negotiating with them, I'm just going to give the money directly to you. And it works the exact same way. If I ever default on the payment, guess what? There's provisions in my contract that says I can't even go to foreclosure, arbitration, nothing. You just get the property back. You get to keep all the money that I've given you. You get to keep all the repairs that I've done. And there's nothing I can do about it. Just be upfront, be honest, but know what you're talking about. Give the information in an easily digestible way, and then ask a lot of questions. Is there any part of that you didn't understand? Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know that was a lot, and I know this is new to you. I've had a lot of success the last couple of years working deals like this. What about it do you need me to go over again? I want to make sure you understand it because I truly believe this will be the best way to get you the most amount of money in the easiest way possible. So I really want this to work out for you. So please tell me which parts you want me to go over again. It's my job. I'll go over it all day until you're just as much an expert as I am. Now, what did you notice about all of these rebuttals that I just went through? All of these objections. I knew what I was talking about. But beyond that, I delivered it in a way to where I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And that comes down to confidence. So many new people have no confidence when they're on the phone because they don't know what they're talking about. And while to an extent I understand that, with the internet, YouTube, the communities that are out there, all the people that are giving this information away, there isn't any reason for you not to be able to come off as a professional who knows what they're talking about, even if you're faking it. And stop letting analysis paralysis stop you from getting on the phone. I have seen so many new people get leads coming in. They're paying money for either PPC or VA leads, or they're wasting money driving for dollars. And I say wasting money is because they're getting these leads, and because they're afraid, because they have analysis paralysis, they don't do anything with them. And then they quit because they're not making any money. Well, of course you're not making any money. You're not doing anything with your leads because you're too afraid. You want to stop being afraid? Call a realtor, find an on-market deal, and try and pitch them cash and creative and get your teeth kicked in by 3 realtors. You'll be bulletproof after that. There's nothing a seller is going to be able to say to you after you've got off the phone with 3 realtors and gotten ripped apart by them. And if you think I've never been ripped apart by a realtor, I got ripped apart by a realtor 2 weeks ago, and I'm really good at this. There are some people that you're not going to be able to get a hold of. There are some people where these rebuttals won't work. That's okay. Put them on a follow-up, move on to the next. There's a fine balance between spending a lot of time trying to work a lead that probably isn't going to close and stepping over or not working a bunch of leads that have a better opportunity to close. But you're so fixated on this one and getting that objection, that exit strategy, that rebuttal, whatever to work, that you're passing over on the rest of them. So keep it going. Don't stop. Don't quit. But don't spend time analysis paralysis or trying to work leads that aren't going anywhere when you could be taking that same energy, putting it into leads that absolutely will go somewhere. So I hope that answered some of your questions for you on objections and rebuttals. Just to give you a quick overview, know what you're talking about, have confidence, and just say it. The only way you're going to get better at these is to practice and hopefully jump on these trainings that we're doing. All right, that's all I've got. This is Conversation to Close. I'm Sean. Have a great rest of your day.